We are just a few days away from what is annually the biggest sporting event in the entire United States of America. That is, of course, the Super Bowl. And on one end, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, who are looking to win their third straight championship, which would put them in unprecedented territory as a dynasty. And on the other end, you have the Philadelphia Eagles, who are looking to maximize their Super Bowl window, and this might be their best chance to do so. Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts, and today we are previewing Super Bowl 59, going over how each team got here, as well as some individual matchups to look out for. Thank you for tuning in. For the Kansas City Chiefs, they coasted through their regular season. They went 15-2, secured the 1 seed in the AFC, and they only lost one game when they were playing all of their key players. Week 18, they rested their starters, and they lost to the Broncos. But other than that, when the key guys are in, they have lost one time this entire season, and that was to the Buffalo Bills. But come playoff time, they were, of course, able to beat Buffalo when it mattered. And this is a team that's identity has completely shifted from what it once was. When star quarterback Patrick Mahomes first came onto the scene, after sitting behind Alex Smith for a year, he threw for 50 touchdowns in his first proper season playing. And, led with star wide receiver Tyreek Hill, as well as stud tight end Travis Kelce, this offense was electric. And for many years, when you would talk about the Chiefs, that's what you would talk about first and foremost. But as the years have gone by, this team has shifted much more towards a defensive focus. And that's never been more evident than this year. They have one of the best cornerbacks in the entire league in Trent McDuffie, as well as two great defensive linemen in Chris Jones and George Karlaftis, as well as perhaps one of, if not the best, linebacking trio in the entire league. This is a very good defense, and by Chiefs standards, this offense has been a little bit more pedestrian than it has been in years past. Prior to the playoffs, throughout the regular season, this team had never scored 30 points this year. So they've really been the explosive plays have been few and far between for this Chiefs team, and part of that is due to wide receiver number one, Rashee Rice, being out the entirety of the year, but is without a doubt been a much slower change of pace for the Chiefs team. However, with that, they've also been really safe with the ball, especially as of late. Now, early on in the year, Patrick Mahomes at one point was throwing more picks than touchdowns, but these last couple months, it's rare to see him make a mistake, and that can really extend to the entirety of this Chiefs team. You might not have the explosive plays that you had in years past, but this offense is more stable than ever. They are more in control than ever, especially with a great running back tandem in Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco. Hunt has really revitalized his career here, and they're able to trust in their offense to have more long, methodical drives. And then when it comes to that defense, they absolutely trust that defense. So the identity of this Chiefs team has shifted, but they've been more successful than ever. And come playoff time, they had their first 30-point game last week in the AFC Championship. So when they need to, they can get the ball rolling. Now, for the Philadelphia Eagles, what a year it has been for them. 2 years ago, they faced the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and they lost. But that was a close game to the very end. And quarterback Jalen Hurts had an amazing game, but it's just kind of overshadowed by his one mistake and a fumble that could ultimately ended up costing them the game. And then the year after that, they respond and they start out 10-1. And it looks like this is a team that is going to maybe be right back in Super Bowl once again. But throughout their final 7 games, including the playoffs, they go 1-6. And when it's playoff time against the Buccaneers, they get blown out 31-9. It was a historic collapse by the Eagles. And coming into this year, there were some question marks, given how the second half of the year went, about if they could ever get back to that Super Bowl, especially under quarterback Jalen Hurts, who, as we mentioned, he had that costly turnover in the Super Bowl. And the following year seemed like a little bit of it got in his head. And he was less safe with the ball than we had ever seen him before. And towards that back half of the season, it was really costing the team. And this year, to start off, throughout the first 4 games before their bye week, it looked like a continuation of that. They were 2-2, and they were calling for head coach Nick Sirianni to be out of there. But ever since then, this team has only lost one game. And we talk about defensive identity for the Chiefs. That's absolutely the case with Philadelphia as well. This is an elite defense, the top scoring defense in the entire NFL. And towards that collapse last year, one thing really notable was the secondary. It seemed like, especially towards the end of games, they just couldn't get the job done. And that was with an aging Darius Slay and James Bradbury being your go-to guys at the corner position. But this year they get Cooper DeJean, they get Quinyon Mitchell, and those two have been huge for this team. You allow Darius Slay to go out there and maybe be a little bit less crucial, play a little bit less crucial of a role. That allows him to be energized and revitalized a little bit when it's time for his number to be called. Then they signed linebacker Nick Bond. He's been huge for them, perhaps the best linebacker in the entire league. Then up front at D lineman, you have Brandon Graham, who got injured, but is looking to make a comeback for the Super Bowl. They've opened up his practice window. And then you have Jalen Carter, who is a stud and always someone that an opposing offensive line really needs to focus on. And then you get to the offense for the Eagles. Of course, you have Saquon Barkley, who rushed for 2,000 yards. Jalen Hurts has been really safe with the ball this year. At times, a little too safe. There's times where you want him to be more confident in throwing it. But he had perhaps his best game in terms of confidence and actual efficiency moving the ball last week. So maybe he's got a little bit of a swagger back. And he's got two great weapons at the wide receiver position in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, as well as two very solid tight ends in Dallas Goedert and even his backup, Grant Calcaterra. Of course, his offensive line is great as well. They allow Jalen to find his open guy, sit back in the pocket, and sometimes he sits back a little bit too long, but he's able to do that because of how great the O-line is. So for both these teams, they have gone on to have really complete seasons up to this point. And any question marks you can have about them are few and far between. There are absolutely some to be had, like the Chiefs and their, lack of offensive production throughout the year. But even then, they've picked that up as of late. And then for Philadelphia, you do worry about Jalen holding on to the ball too long sometimes. Sometimes that doesn't end up with him making the right read as you might think. And especially going up against a guy like Chris Jones and George Karlaftis, you're going to have to get the ball out quick. But both these teams have been amazing this year, and there's a reason they are in the Super Bowl. Philadelphia, they just beat Washington Commanders 55-23. And then we get into individual matchups. And when it comes to two great teams, I think often an indicator of who might be the victor when it's really close is a head coach. And what coach do you trust more? And, this one is, of course, going to the Kansas City Chiefs and Andy Reid, who, with another Super Bowl win, can really cement himself as one of, if not the greatest head coach of all time. And Nick Sirianni catches a lot of criticism, but at the end of the day, he is someone who fits in with the culture of Philadelphia. He is certainly vocal, and, there's certainly a large portion of NFL fans who are not a fan of that. But it does kind of feed into the city as a very passionate sports city. And I would argue that he is over-criticized because some people don't necessarily like his attitude. But he is a very solid head coach in himself. You can make the argument that he has a lot of talent around him, and that's absolutely true. But I'll look at the development of a guy like QB1, Jalen Hurts, who is at times a little bit limited of a passer. You can talk all you want about the tush push, the brotherly shove, the quarterback sneak. At the end of the day, Nick Sirianni, with even just one simple play, has put Jalen Hurts in the best position to succeed. So am I saying Sirianni's, one of the best head coaches in the league? Absolutely not. But I do think he does get a little bit of a bad rep. But of course, the head coaching matchup goes to the Chiefs. Something else I want to focus on is the offensive versus defensive lines on both sides. So for the Chiefs O-line, they've been really good this year. Now, when Jawan Taylor's not getting flagged, he can be a pretty solid tackle. And overall, this is a pretty good offensive line for the Chiefs. But on the other end, they're facing a very not versatile necessarily, dynamic defensive player in Jalen Carter, as well as you might have to worry about the returning Brandon Graham. I think, though, if I'm the Chiefs, I believe that your offensive line can hold up well enough. And I'd be more focused on, other guys like those in the secondary, DeJean, Reed Blankenship, Quinyon Mitchell, whoever it might be. I'd be a little bit more worried about that than the D line, just because your offensive line has been able to hold up all year pretty well. Then for the Eagles, obviously, this is a great offensive line. Jordan Mailata, Cam Jurgens, Lane Johnson, Mekhi Becton. It's really hard to find a flaw within it. But then, of course, much like the Chiefs' O-line playing the Eagles' defense, the Eagles have to worry about guys like Chris Jones and George Karlaftis. But the Eagles, I think, are absolutely prepared to do that. They were a major factor in why Saquon Barkley got to 2,000 yards. No running back does that without a very capable offensive line. And, O-lines and D-lines, to an extent, they don't always get a lot of credit. So I just wanted to highlight both those units to say that they've been really good on both sides for both teams. The Chiefs also notably have a very good run defense. But from what we've seen from Saquon Barkley all year, you're not going to be able to stop him. It's just a matter of how much you can slow him down. And he's been as good as ever this playoff run. So the Chiefs might have one of the better chances of any teams at slowing down Saquon Barkley, but there's still a very good chance he gets one of his breakaway runs for, a 60-yard touchdown, as we seem to see so often from Saquon. He didn't rush for 2,000 yards by coincidence and by just, facing all horrible run defenses. Then we move into receiving. I think Trent McDuffie is probably going to be on A.J. Brown. That makes the most logical sense. The number one corner against the number one wide receiver. And A.J. Brown, to this point, has had somewhat of a quiet postseason. And there's a part of me that feels like he's due for a big game. But at the same time, he's going up against one of the best cornerbacks in the entire league in Trent McDuffie. So that's definitely going to be a key matchup to watch, and one that can really kind of determine the outcome of the game, or at least heavily influence it, in my opinion. And that is, of course, A.J. Brown versus Trent McDuffie. But if A.J. Brown does have yet another quiet postseason game, the Eagles have a great number two in Skinny Batman, Devontae Smith. Now, regular season-wise, this was the least productive year that Smith has had. But if you put him on the other team, he would without a doubt be the number one wide receiver on them, as just a testament to the talent of player that this guy is. And tight end Dallas Goedert has quietly had a really solid postseason for the Eagles. Then on the other end for the Chiefs, this is kind of where I worry about them the most. Their leading receiver was Travis Kelce, of course, who had 800 yards, and it was very much a down year for him. But come postseason time, he's really picked it up. And what we've seen from him, he's really one of the better playoff performers that we've ever seen. A true playoff riser. So he's of course going to be the go-to guy for the for the Chiefs when they're passing the ball. But then outside of that, I do have my concerns because Xavier Worthy was your second highest leading receiver with 600 yards, and then opposite of him you have DeAndre Hopkins. I think Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are going to be able to limit the production of those guys. Worthy has had a very solid rookie year, do not get me wrong, but Quinyon Mitchell is in defensive rookie of the year conversations. And so for the Chiefs, I think you're going to kind of have a mix of definitely getting that run game involved. And your go-to guy at receiver is absolutely going to be Travis Kelce, because I think the Eagles secondary is going to be able to limit the production of your top two wide receivers. So that's how I expect from the Chiefs offense, mix in the run game a little bit, as they have done all year. And Kelce is absolutely that safety net for them. For the Eagles, of course, you're going to rely on Saquon Barkley. He is your go-to guy, and he has not failed you all year. The Chiefs might try to slow him down. And to that extent, I don't know that Saquon's going to rush for 2,000 yards or 200 yards in this game. And if they have to go someone else, I expect them to look to Devontae Smith more so than A.J. Brown, just by virtue of matchups. And while the Chiefs have a great linebacking core, be on the lookout for Dallas Goedert as well. He's been the true safety net and perhaps Philly's best receiver in this postseason. And as for my prediction on who's going to come out the other side, I think if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, this is the best chance that you're going to have because Saquon Barkley is going to be great for years now. He's not going to rush for 2K again, and the O line's only going to age. And you don't know if Zach Bond's come back yet. And with the way that the Chiefs don't have a true number one wide receiver this year, in the absence of Rashee Rice, and the fact that they're going to be matched up against Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to come out with this one. It's going to be a close game, and a lot of people project it to be high scoring. It very well could be, but it could also be a defensive struggle. And the Chiefs could very well win the Super Bowl next year, but I don't know that they're going to threepeat this year. I think this is the best chance that the Philadelphia Eagles are ever going to have with the way that the roster is currently constructed. And offensively, it's been a little bit of a down year for the Chiefs, but they'll absolutely be back next year. However, this year, I have Super Bowl 59 going to the Philadelphia Eagles. In one matchup that isn't necessarily going to be these two guys actively going head to head, but one I do want to highlight here, just, now that we're outside of the actual prediction, is the defensive coordinators for both these teams in Spagnuolo and Vic Fangio. These are two elite defensive coordinators. And we could talk about head coaching all we want. Andy Reid, of course, one of the greatest of all time. Nick Sirianni, maybe a little bit underappreciated. These are two of the best defensive coordinators in the league. And I'm excited to see what they have in store. So I just want to give those guys their flowers for a second. And that's all for today's episode of State of the Association. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. And man, the last time I talked about the Chiefs, I think it was sometime last week. That was on YouTube over here, my highest viewed video ever, more than doubled my second most viewed, which was from a time when I didn't even have a microphone. I didn't go into topics for this long. I would spend maybe 4 minutes on it. And it was actually about Travis Kelce. So, funny thing, they kind of like when I talk about the Chiefs. I'm not a Chiefs fan. It's the irony in it. But I'm thankful for all the attention that one got. And when something does somewhat well like that, and I know in the grand scheme of things, it's really not much, it kind of does give you the motivation to keep going. It makes it feel like it's not necessarily just a dead end road, right? Because ultimately, as you come into things, as you're growing, there are going to be disappointments. Like, I don't look at the performance of my stuff. I don't check my subscriber count or anything because I don't want it to, demotivate me from doing something that is really the dream. And, promoting positivity in sports, bringing back critical thinking to it, as well as storytelling to the art of sports journalism. And is this ever going to go anywhere? I don't know. I would be in the camp to say no, even if just to, kind of deter myself from putting all my eggs in one basket. But yeah, I'm incredibly thankful that that one was able to do as well as it did. Even if in the grand scheme of things, it's not much at all. But yeah, we're just trying to get better every time. I think that was arguably the best piece of work that I've ever put out. This one wasn't one of my favorites, but I definitely did want to get something out about the Super Bowl. But thank you guys for making it this far. If you did, thank you for listening. This has been State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. I appreciate all the support we've had recently. And we're just going to keep doing this for sure.